Good morning, Dr. Sukhwinder Singh Dari, the revered director of the country's prestigious Symbiosis Law School, new campus at Nagpur. Congratulations, sir, for your leadership in establishing this institution, which I was made to understand is in its third year of its existence in the city of Nagpur. Thank you, Professor Abin, for all the warm words that you exchanged now, but more than that, for guiding me into this invitation and then what the program would be through. Faculty members, students gathered to observe the International Human Rights Day. My greetings to all of you on this International Human Rights Day. But before we proceed, something is heavy in all our hearts. And it is important for us as a collective of people concerned about human rights, concerned about our country, concerned about our sovereignty and our leadership, to deeply mourn the death of Colonel Rawat and his wife and his team members, to the sad fate that met them in the city of Kunnur 2 days ago. Human rights cannot be without respect to such revered, tall leaders of our country. We all pay homage to them. We also mourn the death of many, the incarceration of many who should have been outside, who should be enjoying human rights, teaching human rights, protecting human rights, promoting human rights, who unfortunately today are incarcerated or during incarceration passed away. However, we rejoice at your Maharashtra High Court's judgment in releasing Professor Sudha Bharadwaj, a lawyer, a trade unionist, on bail in the UAPA case a few days ago, which has been upheld by the Supreme Court, and we are told that she has been allowed to practice in the city of Nagpur. So you will be the direct beneficiaries of our presence there. And to all of us, let us remind ourselves that this year the United Nations is telling us a very special message. A message to uphold equality. A message to say we will reduce inequality. A message that through thus reducing inequality, we will be advancing and upholding human rights. This is a principle of human rights that is enshrined in our Constitution in a very, very special manner, not only as equality, but equality and non-discrimination, which is the heart of human rights. We will vouch today that we will work for a human rights-based approach in our country to ensure that the inequalities that prevail in various fields are done away with. And the 2030 agenda of the 17 goal sustainable development goals that we have started implementing in our country will ensure that nobody is left behind. And the furthest person is brought to the front. That is the oath that we all take on this day. Because there cannot be equality without justice. There cannot be equality without fraternity. There cannot be equality without liberty. There cannot be equality without the enjoyment of right to life. And without equality, there is no access to education, to health, to liberty, to justice, to livelihood and climate justice. Let us ensure that we build resilience through equality and fight the various forms of exclusion that are prevalent in our country and bring in inclusive policies, practices that will ensure a stronger India, a united India that will ensure that inequality is thrown. These were some general remarks for the day, but I thought I will move straight into the topic that has been given, that has been provided, which is the relevance of state and human rights institutions in our country. Friends, we are sometimes ashamed in the field of human rights which I don't feel we should be, particularly because of various happenings in our country. And today I'm going to posture to your young minds here a whole different approach of rejoicing at a country which has not shied away in creating institutions which globally no other country has come forward to do so. And that is the creation of almost 170 state and national human rights institutions in India. No other country has it. There are countries with national human rights institutions. There are a few countries in Asia and in other parts of the world which have, in addition to National Human Rights Commission or ombudsman bodies or institutions, one or two thematic institutions dealing with women's rights, minority rights, etc. But India has 9 national human rights institutions. The National Human Rights Commission, of course, is known to all of us. But in addition, we have the National Commission for Women, the National Commission for Minorities, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, the National Commission for Scheduled Castes, the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, the Central Information Commission, the National Commission for Safai Karmacharis, and the National Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities. And therefore this whole beautiful range of institutions at the national level, and almost all of them, in almost all the states of the country, we have state human rights institutions along these thematic areas. What are these institutions and how relevant are they to us is what we are supposed to look at. The national and state human rights institutions, unfortunately, are new creations comparatively, and therefore on many occasions people who have created these institutions or who functioned in these institutions, in spite of the fact that they might be judges, in spite of the fact that they might have held very high positions in administration, in policing across the country, in foreign service, they are at a loss to understand what these national and state human rights institutions are. They are creations of the state. They have been created by the state. They have been funded by the state. The personnel there have been placed by the state, carefully selected. They are state institutions. And I usually call such state institutions which work for the protection and promotion of human rights to be institutions which are of a hybrid nature, and they are institutional protectors of human rights, and therefore they are institutional defenders of human rights of the peoples of our country, of the peoples of our nations. I would like first to say what a national human rights institution is not. It is not a legislative body. It is not a judicial body. It is not an executive body. It is not an NGO. On the contrary, it is what we all want. It is not also a UN body. It is a body which is independent of all this. And therefore it is very difficult for people serving in these institutions to understand what this institution actually is. These institutions have, according to me, 3 main tasks. Whether they perform it or not is a different question altogether. But there are 3 main tasks, whether it's a Women's Commission, whether it's a Minority Commission, whether it's a Child Rights Commission, whether it is a Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities. You call them by whatever name you want. They are institutions which are very specifically for advising the government, for creating awareness among the people about their rights related to that particular theme, and they have a very special role in handling complaints of human rights. So it's extremely important for us to understand that these are institutions which are to advise, to create awareness, and to handle complaints. And you will find the same core content in almost all the legislations through which all these bodies have been formed. But what is important is globally there are certain principles which govern their functioning. And unfortunately in our country there is no induction program. And I invite your law school, I do this to every law school I visit, asking them, can you devise an induction program for members, chairpersons of state, national human rights institutions? Symbiosis College, being one of the best in the country, should perhaps accept this challenge and then go forward as your program of offering all these chairpersons and members of national and state human rights institutions, 170 of them, multiply into a minimum of 5. We have 700 such persons, and you can imagine with the turnover, you will have regularly, annually, a large number of people who need to be inducted into what these Paris principles which govern them are. And what do these Paris principles tell you? They tell you the common minimum program, that all these institutions, wherever they are existing, whether it is in India, whether it is in Bangladesh, whether it is in Nepal, whether it is in Indonesia, whether it is in Thailand, whether it is in Taiwan, whether it is in Uganda, whether it is in Germany, whether it is in Paris, whether it is in Chile, wherever it is, they have to ensure that they are independent. They are created by the state, but they have to be independent. And that independence has to be seen in their appointment, the independence has to be seen in their finance, the independence has to be seen in their power of appointing persons. Unfortunately, we will do a little criticism later, but principle of independence is very important. And the independence is not by inviting the higher dignitaries of the country to the human rights institutions. The independence is shown by standing with the poorest of the poor, with the lowliest of the lowliest, by those who suffer from day-to-day human rights violations, wherever they occur, whether they are women, whether they are aged, whether they are scheduled castes, whether they are homeless. These are the people who should feel the warmth and the hug and the strength and the power of this institution to protect them. That is the power of independence that Paris Principles speaks of. Yes, they have to be autonomous, but they have to be independent. And the governments of our day have to allow them to be independent. The second is to ensure that they are plural. The plural, strong, divergent Indian society has to be represented in these institutions, not only in the members, in the staffing, to ensure that because of this diversity, you will ensure more people are accessing this institution with trust. If you have an all-male institution, if an all-judges institution, people will not trust it, for it is not plural. But if you have a good rainbow-colored institution with people drawn from different parts of society, competent and independent and knowledgeable, that is an institution which will attract people from different walks of life to place trust in that institution. People have to trust that institution. The third is to ensure that that institution is accessible. It has to be accessible. And to be accessible, it has to cooperate. Cooperate with whom? With other national human rights institutions, with civil society organizations, with the United Nations. It has to cooperate. And it has to be competent. The fourth principle, it has to be a very competent institution. And therefore, I am insisting it has to have a good induction program for its members, for its chairpersons, for its senior staff, to ensure that we are competent. They have also, therefore, to be effective, and last, to be transparent. Now, these are the 6 Paris principles that need to be followed to instill confidence that we have a strong state and national human rights institution. Those in custody in our country, for various reasons, genuine and false, have to ensure that they have the ears and eyes of these institutions which are created in their states, to be able to see them, to hear their wails and to find redress. After several years, 2 days ago, a member of the National Human Rights Commission, Honorable Jyotika Kaldra, visited Chennai and visited the Pural jail and saw many persons who had fractured hands and legs, all of which were claimed to have been caused in the bathrooms of the police stations of Tamil Nadu. All of you must be wondering, what is this state? Why do they have such bathrooms which land people with fractures? The bathrooms are the safe rooms for torture today in a police station which is covered with a CCTV camera. So the fractures take place only in the police stations. The broken bones are originated only in our police station bathrooms. And all these cases, they were all in jail. This was a case that was taken to the National Human Rights Commission. I remember it was heard in a public hearing in September 2018, if I am not mistaken. But the visit to the jail took place in 3 days ago by the honorable member from Delhi. Therefore, friends, we have to have these institutions holding on to these principles and ensuring that they perform. And we have a variety of ways in which they have to perform. Unfortunately, they are so in their appointment process. We are in a country where we are overwhelmed by the fact that you have been in government service, that you have been an IAS officer, that you have been an IPS officer, that they don't value professors of law. Your director is competent to be a member of the national or state human rights institution. We had perhaps one of the country's best first chairperson in the National Commission for Children, Professor Shanta Sinha, who was an activist and academician, who had worked with children, who had worked for years, decades with children. And she was a wonderful chairperson of the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, the first founding chairperson. So we've had wonderful people. We have had a very good chairperson, which I can remember, of the National Commission for Women, who was Mohini Giri, and she's still alive. I remember Mohini Giri coming to Tamil Nadu and doing wonderful work here. She in fact inquired in the early 90s, if I remember, the early 90s, a police atrocity that had taken place in the state of Tamil Nadu in the Kodaikanal Hills, where released bonded laborers were there and they were beaten by the police on some grounds which I don't want to get into now, but she came to inquire. And when we sent the invitation to her, she said, "Why are you not inviting the NHRC?" And my reply to that very respectful lady was, "Ma'am, we want a woman. And we want a women's commission to come and inquire, because women have also been brutally handled." And she came. And she came willingly. And I saw the SP of that district, one Mr. Doreraj, who must have retired many years ago. His pants were wet, and I hope you will understand what I mean. That was the moral strength of the chairperson. I recall Dr. Purnima Advani, who was a lawyer and a doctor. Very good combination. She headed the National Commission for Women. And she came to several hearings in Tamil Nadu, and she really ensured that she drew respect and made officers of very high rank start respecting the violations, start respecting the rights, and having to shed their heads in shame for the violations that they had performed. So we have had stalwarts. We have had Justice Venkatacharya. We have had Justice Verma. We have had very, very powerful chairpersons and members of our National Human Rights Commission, etc. And these are institutions which can be approached in a very simple manner. You don't need complicated manner to approach these institutions. You don't need lawyers to approach these institutions. And the best way, my dear friends in Symbiosis, to approach these institutions. Every time you are able to see in your mobile a violation of human rights, please ensure that you don't remain silent. You and I cannot afford to remain silent, because that is an institution that we have created, and this institution, if it has to be relevant, has to be used by students of law as people who move these institutions. You see a news item which talks about a person with disability whose rights have been violated. Let it not go as a news item that you have read and forgotten the following day. Take that news item, send it to the commissioner, the state commissioner for persons with disabilities of that respective state. Send it to the central commissioner for persons with disabilities, and you will see that hand of the commission, of the commissioner of this institution committed to work with persons with disabilities, is laid upon that unknown name, unknown face of that person with a disability because of your intervention. Friends, you and I have to learn that being a lawyer today is not to practice in courts alone. Courts may be areas where you and I can earn. You and I can make money. You and I can use legal services authority and do pro bono service. But the satisfaction for each one of you, my dear friends, will come the day when, as a law student and as a young lawyer, you simultaneously every week are able to send one complaint to any one of the state or national human rights institutions. But you and I have a different role also. In addition to sending these complaints, you and I have to ensure that these institutions function, that these institutions are monitored. I would ask Symbiosis College on this day to do a study, open appeal, to do a study of how effective are the websites of all the commissions in each of the states in this country. And if you are interested, Professor Abhin is there. I can pass on a questionnaire which all of you will do by studying these commissions on their websites and seeing how much information is available. You will be shocked. Many commissions don't have websites. You will be shocked. Many commissions do not have websites in the language of the state that they perform in, and many commissions do not give numbers, do not give email IDs for people to be able to communicate to them. And therefore, if these institutions have to be relevant, their relevance is in how relevant you and I make them. And it's not an easy job, it's a tough job. No institutions, like I had a batch of interns with me who are doing their LLM online, and one of the tasks I'd given them was to visit the state human rights institution, visit with a few questions. And the answer was, who are you to visit our institution? Or a public institution? The answer is, who are you to visit our institution? I had asked another online assignment was to visit the District Legal Services Authority of the respective states from where these students came. And the District Legal Services Authority secretary said, who are you to ask them to come to my office and meet us? I said, my goodness me, we are wanting them to be exposed to an institution that is in existence, that is supposed to be performing free legal aid to the poorest of the poor. And the member secretary there of the district says, who are they to come and see me? Friends, these institutions will work the day you and I, your professors and me, are as responsible citizens of this country, who are not bothered only about fundamental rights, but about upholding fundamental duties under the Constitution, that we are able to monitor these institutions. And the day we are able to monitor these institutions, that would be the day when these institutions will become more responsive. I am usually considered to be a pain on these institutions. Why? Because I love them. I have been working since 1995 with these institutions. I have memories that nobody will have about the good work these institutions have done in compensating people in custodial violence cases. But I have grouses. I have deep grouses. What are my grouses? My grouses are that the National Human Rights Commission has spent crores of rupees, ordered crores of rupees as compensation in cases of extrajudicial killings, in cases of custodial deaths, in cases of torture. But had they followed it up also with recommendations for prosecuting, not every case, but the cases which they think are the best cases for prosecution, I am sure the scenario of custodial violence in this country would have come down. And therefore, you have to work as institutions which have power. And you have power. These institutions have power. The power of functioning of these institutions doesn't depend on the letter of the law. It depends on the creativity of the mind. And I'll give you an example. When Purnima Advani was the chair of the National Commission for Women, Dr. Vasanti Devi, a former very learned Vice Chancellor of one of our universities in Tamil Nadu, was the state chairperson of the State Women's Commission. And she came up to me and said, Henry, I want to do a public hearing. I said, ma'am, public hearing? On what? And she gave me 3 topics. I'll come to that later. And I said, fine ma'am, we will definitely do that. But you don't have powers under an act. At that time it was a geo creation. So I said, you only have a government order. So you cannot summon anybody. She said, so what? I said, most probably when the government knows that you are going to do something like this, the government will ensure that all your members themselves will not attend. Can't you give me a positive solution, Henry? She asked. I said, of course I'll do it. And we worked together and we said we'll make it as a joint initiative between the National Commission for Women in Delhi and the State Commission for Women in Tamil Nadu. with all the summons going from the National Commission for Women, because they were a statutory authority and they had powers to issue summons. One of the thematic subjects that she had in Madurai was state violence against women. So violence of the state authorities, instrumentalities of state against women. And we had taken about 33 cases. Believe me, we sent only one summon to the DGP of Tamil Nadu listing all the cases and all the police officers who were there on duty on the date of occurrence, which varied in each case. And they must have been transferred after that to 2-3 places. 300 police officers, almost 23 Superndo police. And because Superndo police were coming, there was an ADGP rank officer who was heading them, all appearing before the commission. This was the first time Tamil Nadu and perhaps this country had ever witnessed so many officers being summoned in a public hearing. This is how these commissions become effective. These commissions have to educate people. The inquiries are not to punish people. The inquiries are to educate people in authority that you have to adhere to what is being told. And this has to be done by fostering a number of other activities. And it is not only by complaints handling. If you want to create awareness, we have to ensure that human rights is not taught only in the law schools of this country. The lawyers learning human rights is not going to change this country. But if human rights is taught and recommended to be taught, pressured to be taught, advocated to be taught, lobbied to be taught in our schools of our country, that is where the new India which respects equality, that is where the new India which vows to ensure that nobody is left behind will be born. That India is not born through court orders of this country. I don't want to disrespect any court order, but that is not the place where changes take place. Changes take place in the classrooms of our nursery schools, of our primary schools, of our higher secondary schools, of our universities, when human rights becomes a part of our culture. And making human rights a part of our culture is another promotional avenue that the national human rights institutions have to take. So complaints handling can be there. But in addition to complaints handling, we have to ensure that we have an awareness building which is through education. And that education is also in the classrooms of our country, for the younger minds. I have dwelled in classroom teaching of human rights. And there is a story I love telling people. One of our teachers, in class 6, 7, 8 we were teaching, and we have reached about 15 lakh children in over 12,000 schools with 11,000 teachers over a period of time. It's the best experience I've had in human rights. The fighting, the noise making is not satisfying. The teaching of children is the most satisfying experience. And this child, this teacher had engaged with children, and this child was a boy. His name was Ganesh Perumal. He's now a teacher. He's now a teacher in a private school. He's a big man now, and he was in his class 7. And on a Saturday, he was playing in his village when he saw an old lady coming up out of her house and cursing her daughter-in-law for having given birth to a girl child and ordering her to ensure that the girl child was killed. This fellow was shocked. This small little chap was shocked, because right to equality was something that he had been taught by his teacher in class, and the teacher's education remains. My lecture will never remain, but the teacher's lecture will remain, because she's a teacher and I'm not a teacher. So this boy went up to this old lady, and that teaching was not ordinary teaching. That was a very deep teaching, because it led to action. He went up to this old lady with her, in our villages we have these villages with a gold ornament here, and the ear lobe has been pulled out. Looked at that old lady. I don't know from where he got the power and the energy to do so. Challenged her why she had beaten up cursed this daughter-in-law, and directed her to do away. And he started lecturing about how a boy child, a male child and a female child were equal. One tight slap he got. He goes back. By the time there's a small crowd which comes, he comes back again, moves himself inside the crowd, goes back there and repeats exactly what he said. He got another slap on his eyes. Mind your business. Never turn up here. The boy is terribly disturbed. He goes home. He has a bargain with his mother. And the bargain that he had with his mother was, this only children can do, was, you come with me, Amma, and you come to meet this old lady. Please agree that you will keep this small little child, this girl child. Today is Saturday, tomorrow Sunday. And on Monday, you accompany me to school, and we will hand over this child to my human rights teacher. And once she is handed over to the human rights teacher, she will look after her. What trust in human rights? What trust in equality? What trust in the teacher? Very special mother who agreed to it. Mother and child walk up to the old lady again, pick up courage, and this time he says, I've come with my mother. Please don't beat me. Hand over that child. We will ensure that the child lives, and she will live in the hands of my teacher. They were astonished. The old lady did not know what to do. Hugged the child, hugged the boy, Ganesha-Perumal, and gave him a public assurance that the child would not be killed. This was not through money. This was through human rights education. And this is what the education that all our institutions should be able to promote through our respective governments to ensure that human rights are protected, that the right to equality is upheld. But this boy went back on Monday morning to his classroom, to his teacher, and said, Teacher, in order to ensure that such acts don't take place, we are going to have an activity of monitoring all pregnant mothers in our villages. And the moment the mothers deliver a child, then we will play hide and seek and go into that house to hide, to see whether that child, if it is a female child, is alive or has been killed. What a beautiful lesson. This is the beauty of human rights education being taught. But this has to be promoted, and our institutions have to promote. Our institutions are told, these institutions are told they don't have teeth. I am telling you, They need not have teeth. They have to be vigilant, they have to be creative, they have to believe in cooperation, they have to believe in intervention. And if they intervene on many matters in public interest, even before courts, which the National Human Rights Commission can do, a lot of justice will prevail for those for whom the courts of our country do not have time. Human rights, therefore, my dear friends, is working through these institutions. Our country has the privilege of these institutions. I have accompanied Japan. I have accompanied Thailand. I have accompanied Bangladesh at times when they never had institutions, talking about our institution. Today Bangladesh has an institution. 2 years ago Taiwan has an institution. Japan is still fighting for its institution. We have 170 institutions. The students of Symbiosis Law School in Nagpur, located in the most central area of the country, should perhaps on this day vow to ensure that you will join us, join me as members of the All India network of individuals and groups working with national and state human rights institutions to monitor these institutions, which we can do online. And by doing so, we will ensure that these institutions become more relevant, these institutions become more effective, because that effectiveness will only grow through your actions. There are tons of stories to be told, but the best story is of students who have come for internships with us, online internships with us, physical internships with us, who have moved these institutions and then followed up each of their complaints that they have moved through the right to information petitions, and seen that through their interventions, through the small little box called the computer, the mobile phone, and the initiatives they were able to take, they were able to bring justice without going to courts, without engaging lawyers, but through perseverance and hard work. I wish Symbiosis Law School on this International Human Rights Day takes this as their resolve to ensure that we will study and that we will work with national and state human rights institutions. Thank you very much, and I'm open to questions, and not only questions, but to continue this journey of working with human rights along with you, because it is you young people who can bring change to this India, and it is our role to follow young people like you. Thank you.